Is Velus Jones Jr. on the hot seat? That is going to be the topic of today's episode of Chicago Bears Now. My name is Harrison Graham from Chat Sports. With DeAndre Carter on board, I just wonder where Velus stands with the organization entering year 3, entering his 3rd training camp. Before I give my analysis, my thoughts, I want to hear from all of you. Predict it for me. Will Velus Jones Jr. make the Bears' 53-man roster? If you think he will, type Y for yes. If you think he won't, type in for no. We'll get into all of it coming up on today's show. All right, is Velus on the hot seat? That's what we're talking about here with the Bears adding another return specialist, another guy who could do some things offensively at wide receiver in DeAndre Carter. That was my initial thought. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but my first thought was, is that bad news for Velus Jones? Because through 2 NFL seasons, outside of being a good kick returner, he hasn't shown much. He has only 11 catches in 26 games. I actually like him as a runner. Jet sweeps, occasionally lined up at running back. I think he would be a better running back than receiver just because he doesn't track the ball that well in the air. He's an average route runner. I think he could be an interesting gadget player as a running back type, but they haven't done that a bunch with him, although he's clearly been more smooth in that regard than as a receiver. He's a great kickoff returner. There's no doubt about it. And this new kickoff rule has kind of given him new life, in my opinion, in terms of making this team 27.4 among the best in the NFL in terms of return average. But then they go out and sign DeAndre Carter, who's one of the better returners in the NFL and is shown more in his career as a receiver, and it just makes you think. It makes you think, what do they think about Velus Jones? Because what does he provide after being a good kickoff returner? Again, the new rule helps. There's going to be more returns in the game. He's a good returner. There's value in that. But he can't return punts because he doesn't track the ball that well. Maybe they give him another shot this year. I doubt it, but we'll see. And he has pretty big limitations offensively. Doesn't track the ball well downfield, even though he can get separation on deep balls. He's not a great route runner, and his hands are average. So if you're only a jet sweep guy and kickoff returner, I just don't know how much longer that leash is, and I think signing DeAndre Carter at minimum is sending him a message like, hey, you need to have a strong training camp in preseason, otherwise we may go in a different direction. So who has the edge when you kind of compare these two players in 4 different categories? Again, as a kick returner, I think Velus is better. He's more explosive, he's bigger, so he can break tackles a little bit easier. He had a higher average last year by a pretty wide margin, although on lower volume. I think it was 16 returns compared to 40 from Carter, but he is a better kickoff returner in my opinion. Punt returner, it's DeAndre Carter. Velus can't return punts. They tried it his rookie year. He muffed 3 punts. They tried it again last year. He muffed his first punt of the preseason, and they were like, we're done. We can't put you back there, man, if you can't catch the ball. They had to go sign gosh, I'm totally blanking. He signed with the 49ers. Trent Taylor signed with the 49ers this offseason because they needed somebody to catch the ball because he couldn't do it. DeAndre Carter in his career, good punt returner, almost 10 yards per return. Doesn't have a touchdown, but he's reliable. He catches the ball for the most part, and he gives you some explosive ability. Now, I'll admit, if Velus caught the ball consistently, I'd rather have him back there because I think he's more dynamic than DeAndre Carter. But Carter is kind of a better Trent Taylor. He's more sure-handed, and he gives you more juice on returns. As a wide receiver, DeAndre Carter, again, he hasn't had a great career as a receiver. He is more of a return specialist, but he has over 1,200 yards receiving in his career where Velus has less than 130 in 2 seasons. And 2 years ago, we mentioned this on our breaking news video when they signed Carter with Chargers wide receiver coach at the time, Chris Beatty, who is now the receiver coach in Chicago. Coincidence? Doesn't feel like it. He had his best year as a pro as a receiver with 46 catches and over 500 yards. So those two get reunited now. You can't tell me he didn't have an influence on this signing. So these relationships matter, man. It's a whole new offensive staff. I'm sure Ryan Poles is, hoping it works out for Velus. He spent a 3rd-round pick on him, but Ryan Poles has also shown the willingness to move on from guys quickly if it doesn't work out. Chase Claypool is like, yep, that trade sucked, we're moving on. Like, he will not be afraid to admit to a mistake. So I think it's pretty clear that the clock is ticking on Velus. We'll get to our next category here in just a moment, but first, Rome Odunze, he's definitely making this roster. He's a lock. If you want to get his jersey, go to chatsports.com/Rome. That link is in the comments and in the description of this video. Click and shop today, chatsports.com/Rome. If you forget and think later, simple, /Rome after chatsports.com. All right, Gadget, kind of as a runner, I do think Velus is better. Carter can do some of that. That's the one thing going against Velus, though, is even in the categories Velus is better, Carter can still do those things, even if it's not as quite the same level. Like, whereas as a punt returner, like up to this point, Velus has proven he can't return punts. But again, I said it earlier, I think as a runner, as a jet sweep guy, Velus, he's much more comfortable once the ball is in his hands than he is when he's trying to track the football, whether it's on a deep ball downfield or the ball's in the air on a punt. He catches kickoffs pretty well, but he doesn't have dudes running at him. I think there's a big difference there. I've said it for 2 years. I still think they should give him a look at running back. I don't know if they just don't think that's a possibility for his skill set or if he just doesn't want to. I'm not sure. I think he looks pretty smooth. Getsy would run that toss sweep with him sometimes last year. Had a couple of nice runs doing it. Hits the hole hard, and he has good acceleration. So, I don't know if they have plans for him in that regard this year, but at minimum, DeAndre Carter signing puts the pressure on Velus Jones to have a really strong training camp. I don't think there's any question about that. So if you had to keep one, who would you pick? Would you pick Velus Jones, type VJ, or would you take DeAndre Carter and just move on, type DC? I'd rather Velus Jones ball out and be that guy because he's young, and I think he's a more dynamic, fluid athlete. I don't think they trust him. And you can't really blame him because he's more known up to this point in his young career for the mistakes he's made than the good plays he's made. And you run out of goodwill pretty quick in this league. It's the NFL. It's not for long. If you're not producing, they're going to find someone else who can. So big couple of months coming up for Velus Jones. I hope it works out. Seems like a great dude. But up to this point, he has not been a consistent player whatsoever. All right, coming up next, we're going to kind of tier out the Bears wide receiver room. We did this a little bit earlier on Thursday as well, but kind of want to dive deeper there and kind of figure out, who's on the roster bubble, who's not, and kind of go from there because there's a lot of competition that's been created by Ryan Poles. But first, hit that subscribe button. We publish daily Bears content here on this channel, usually multiple videos per day. We go live every Monday and Thursday as well, so if you want to get your questions answered on the show, got to join us for our live streams. Subscribe, turn on notifications, that way you never miss out when we go live or when we publish a video. All right, you look at the Bears wide receiver depth chart. Obviously, the big three is what we've talked about a lot. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. But you get after those guys, and there's a lot of competition. So when you start to tier out this wide receiver depth chart, you got those three guys as your locks. I don't think there's any question. The only way one of these guys isn't on the roster is if they have a season-ending injury in training camp, which, knock on wood, that's not going to happen. That would be the only way they wouldn't count against your 53, obviously. I think number 4 is Tyler Scott. I think he's likely safe. I can't say 100%. If he's terrible in training camp, they could, of course, move on, but this is only his second year after being a 4th-round pick last year. Showed some flash, certainly inconsistent, but I don't think they're going to punt on a player after one season. New offensive staff, so it's not impossible, so I can't call him a roster lock, but I think he's in a pretty good position. So let's say those 4 guys are safe. To me, you got these 4 players for 1 or 2 spots, probably 2. I think they'll carry 6 receivers because I think this team will throw the football a lot. More teams these days carry 6 receivers instead of 5. DeAndre Carter, Velus Jones Jr., Dante Pettis, Colin Johnson. Well, Carter, Jones, and Pettis, their skill sets all overlap. They're all returners, and they all have limitations as receivers, okay? So, what do you value if you're this coaching staff? Who can you trust? Well, I think you can trust Carter the most to give you the most consistency as a punt and kickoff returner. Velus would be the best kickoff returner. Dante would be kind of in between the two. He would probably also offer a little more as a receiver if he could get back to what he was a couple of years ago. So again, it's kind of pick your poison. And then you have Colin Johnson, who could kind of serve as a tight end 4 big slot blocking receiver hybrid, who can kind of give you different looks. So I kind of look at this and I'm like, okay, we're talking about Velus on the hot seat. I definitely think Pettis is in trouble now. Like, he's going to really have to show a lot to make this team. He missed all of last year with an injury. And then I just wonder, okay, again, if it comes down to Carter or Velus, you pick one. Maybe you take Colin Johnson as the other guy who just gives you something else in terms of skill set. So it's going to be very interesting. The competition at training camp at this position is going to be fun to watch after the top 3 guys. And I, for one, can't wait to see how it all plays out. Make the call for me. How many wide receivers do you think make the 53-man roster for the Chicago Bears? 5, 6? Could they go 7? I'd be shocked if they went 7, but I think they'll go 6. Give me your thoughts in the comments below. My prediction as we sit here in June: DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Tyler Scott, DeAndre Carter, one more guy makes the team. Do they go with another burner returner type in Velus if Carter's already on the team? Do they go with Dante Pettis, who gives you some return ability, but maybe is a little bit better of a receiver? Or again, do they go with Colin Johnson, who is kind of a big body guy who can post people up, block a little bit, and kind of give you a different skill set at 6'6", 225 pounds. So that's where I'm at right now. I'll have a new roster projection once we get into training camp, so things can certainly change between now and then. Appreciate everybody for tuning in to this segment of Chicago Bears Now. If you want more content on the Bears, we are the channel for you. So hit that subscribe button, turn on the noties. We'll see you guys soon.